Today's learning objectives: 1. Describe 3 phases of self-management in relation to conflict. 2. Incorporate tools and strategies for before, during, and after conflict. And lastly, explain how our brains are wired to react to conflict and how we can actively change our response. I'm very pleased to introduce today's panelists here again. Dr. Andy Baines. She is a family doctor in Calgary, is an ACT physician lead, and has a keen interest in patient medical home initiatives. Dr. Baines has worked on various projects in Alberta to advance the patient medical home model and the team-based care. Dr. Gemma Vomero is the ACT physician lead and pediatrician here in Calgary. She previously led the pediatric hospital medicine for 7 years and now heads the complex care program. Dr. Vomero has led change initiatives in previous leadership roles and has engaged in many quality improvement initiatives in clinical, administrative, and medical education domains. Our session today is led by Michelle Henne. She is a senior ACT consultant, so please take it away.
Thanks so much, Gwen. And good morning, everyone. Welcome. And today's session is about conflict. And as usual, we'll be looking at it through the lens of leads in a caring environment. And the session on conflict, today's focus in particular is going to be on lead self, and particularly self-awareness and managing self. And this session focuses on conflict, but of course, conflict is a very large topic, and we're going to home in on just one small aspect of this larger topic today. And we do encourage you, though, if you want to go deeper and learn more about it, we do offer a PIP support session on this topic. And in 90 minutes, you learn more about mastering the process of working through conflict and complete one of your CPSA PIP requirements for your licensing at the same time. So the next session will be held on June 4th, and there will be other sessions planned into the future if you can't make that particular one. So be sure to check our website, and I believe Alex is popping that into the chat if you want the link. All right, when we hear the word conflict, we often picture uncomfortable situations, and it can feel very unsettling for us as humans. The reality is that it's impossible to eliminate conflict. And even if we could, that would mean there'd be no growth and no diversity and healthy competition. So conflict, since it's part of human nature, we really can't fully eliminate it. We can choose to look at it, though, as an opportunity to learn and grow and deepen our relationships, because allowing issues to fester is often more damaging in the long run than the conflict. So again, as humans, we experience some degree of conflict, usually several times a day. And many of you have likely looked into your rearview mirror when you're driving on the highway and noticed you're being followed way too closely by the vehicle behind you. And so if we think about this shared experience, what emotions does that evoke in you just thinking about that? And how do you typically express those emotions when you're driving? And how does your behavior change in that moment and maybe impact those around you? So again, conflict is an extensive topic, but we want to talk about what we can do ourselves personally when it comes to dealing with conflict. And we're going to focus in on 3 particular phases. So preparing for conflict because it's inevitable, managing our response in the moment, and then reflecting and learning from conflict after it's happened. So we'll start off here with preparing for the inevitable. And sometimes we know we're heading into conflict, but often it catches us off guard. And this is when it's so important to be ready to choose the response you're going to feel good about after the fact. And Viktor Frankl is a psychologist, or was a psychologist and Holocaust survivor. And in his book, Man's Search for Meaning, he talked about that brief space between stimulus and response, and how we have the opportunity to choose our response. And in doing so, we can grow and be free from unnecessary strife. And we're going to focus on that moment. And we've talked about this several times in the past, but it really is key to understanding our conflict response. The brain's limbic system is strongly at play when it comes to conflict. And as a quick review, the limbic system is the primitive part of our brain where threat is perceived. It's that center of emotion, and its goal is to keep us safe. And it houses the amygdala. And we often talk about amygdala hijack when our primitive survival mode is triggered. Then we have our prefrontal cortex, on the other hand, which is the center of our higher level thinking, and where we regulate the emotion and modulate the amygdala's responses. So the goal then is to engage that prefrontal cortex during that moment between stimulus and response in conflict to strengthen that neural pathway so that the amygdala response can be modulated. And when that pathway is nicely entrenched, people find it much easier to stay calm and in control in emotionally charged situations. So when we're not in a conflict situation, more often we take even just a moment to be aware of our surroundings, aware of our thoughts, aware of even how our body feels in the moment. The more we're practicing connecting our prefrontal cortex and forging that neural pathway. So there are several ways you can do that, strengthen that pathway. And probably the most well-known is meditation. So even 5 to 10 minutes a day of focused attention. You don't necessarily have to be sitting in lotus position. You can just literally take some time to focus your attention. So noticing sensations uh, of your body, noticing what's going on in the present moment is really what it's all about. Or you can focus on mindful walking. So if you happen to be walking somewhere, just tune in to what are the sensations that you're feeling, the feeling of your feet on the ground, the breeze on your skin, maybe the sounds going on around you. And this starts to build a habit of present moment awareness, which again is so helpful in the brain. Regular journaling, and particularly exploring your emotions through journaling with curiosity rather than judgment, also strengthens this emotional awareness and regulation. And you know what they say, when you can name your emotions, you can tame them. So again, it just gives you greater control over your behavior when you understand the emotions that you're feeling. And then the final thing is doing sensory check-ins. And again, this can be 1 minute, 2 minute breaks throughout the day just to notice all 5 senses. And again, it's just going to create that pathway that you can access more easily during stressful situations. And I will say anybody with an Apple Watch, you can set it up so that it reminds you periodically throughout the day to do just a 1 minute, 2 minute mindfulness session, and it kind of guides you through that. So we have some tools at our fingertips. But let's take a moment right now to do one of these mindfulness activities. And you can do this wherever you are, as long as you can pause for a moment. Even if you're driving, you can do this exercise with us. Just maybe keep your eyes open for sure. But we're going to just start by taking a deep breath. So breathe in through your nose, deeply into your belly. And as you exhale, just allow any tension to be released from your shoulders, from your neck, your forehead, eyebrows. Take another nice deep breath. And then wherever you are right now, even if you're driving, just focus in. What are 3 things you can see? What do you notice around you? What details do you notice about those 3 things in your vision? And take another breath. And now focus in on what you hear. So what is the closest thing that you can hear? Maybe it's tinnitus. Maybe it's the sound of your computer hum. Another breath. And focus on what is the furthest sound from you. And as you take another breath, focus in on what you can feel. Where are your hands at the moment? What are they touching? What do you feel on your fingers and your hands? What's the texture, sensation? What are your feet touching? Can you feel the support underneath them? Maybe you can feel the sensation of your socks. And as you breathe again, do you notice a smell, a scent in the air? Do you feel the sensation of the air against your skin? And with your last breath, what do you taste? Anything in particular? And then one last breath. And as you release, just allow any tension to be released and you start off a fantastic day. All right. So we'll come back now. And again, a great time to do this kind of activity is when you're washing your hands. Because as physicians, you probably do this several times a day. And it's a great time to just focus in on what you're experiencing sensorily. And again, very helpful at calming the brain and also forging that pathway. Okay, so next we're going to move into managing in the moment. And the amygdala, as we said, is always scanning for threats all day long, and it responds very quickly before the prefrontal cortex is even aware that something is going on. So the first thing we tend to notice is a physical response, and it's different for everyone, but typically it's something like a knot in the stomach or a sense of flushing in your chest and neck, or sweating palms is common. But the key is to figure out what is your personal physical tell. What is that first sign? And then as soon as you become aware of that, you can preempt that full amygdala hijack before it takes hold by engaging your prefrontal cortex. And as soon as we bring that awareness, we can start to control our response. So a big part of that is curiosity. So once you're aware that you're feeling a threat, then you can get curious about it. It's almost like you're starting to detach from the emotion. What am I feeling here? What am I reacting to? Is it actually real? Or maybe it's a story that I'm creating about a situation. And the more we can engage that higher level thinking in the prefrontal cortex, the easier it is to avoid getting caught up in reactivity, which is the goal. So if we consider a tool, there's one called STOP. And even if you can just remember this acronym, so stop what you're doing. When you feel that sensation, stop what you're doing for a moment. Take a deep breath. Observe your body's sensations, emotions, and thoughts, and then proceed with that awareness. So again, that curiosity and aware that something is going on. I'm going to pass it to Andy now to give us another tool that we can use.
Thanks, Michelle. So, yeah, some of you may be familiar, others may not, with the box breathing technique. This is something that I use personally, but also have taught it a lot to patients. So it's been useful in my practice, even with kids. Often we see kids that are experiencing anxiety, and this is a really simple tool that can be taught to really anybody. And I like it because you can use it in any of the three phases of conflict. So you can use it as a way to just prepare your body, knowing that we're going to experience conflict, sometimes throughout the day or week, small or big ones, sometimes difficult patient interactions or something that didn't go well with your team that you have to have a conversation about. So you can prepare your body for those types of experiences by going into things calmly. You can also use it during conflict. So, let's say you are having a difficult patient interaction. It's something that you can be doing. I don't know if you guys, ever have this experience where someone's kind of coming in hot at an appointment and your palms start sweating and your voice gets a bit shaky and you're kind of, trying to settle yourself so that you look together. But this is something that you can use during that appointment and nobody really knows you're doing it. So it's quite subtle. And afterwards, too, after you've had maybe an experience with conflict, it's something you can do to help settle your body so that you can move on with your day. So I just wanted to walk everybody through one or two cycles of this. Generally, you would try and do 3 or 4 cycles, and that's kind of how you get into a calmer place. But just for those that aren't familiar, it's nice to kind of just go through it once. So I'm just going to count everybody in. So basically, you're breathing in for a count of 4, then you're holding your breath there for a count of 4. Then you're breathing out for a count of 4 and holding it there for a count of 4. So everybody can breathe in, 2, 3, 4, hold it there, 2, 3, 4, out, 2, 3, 4, hold it there, 3, 4, and in, 2, 3, 4, hold, 2, 3, 4, out, 2, 3, 4, hold, 2, 3, 4. So, yeah, I think it's just something you can do. You don't have to physically count, you're just kind of estimating and holding those breaths and breathing slowly. And there's pretty good evidence for this reducing your level of anxiety in a moment. So I hope some of you find that helpful and consider incorporating it into your day. I sometimes even just do it between patients, as I finish up a chart, just to kind of get ready for the next appointment. So give it a try. I'll hand it back over, Michelle.
Thanks, Andy. I feel relaxed already. That's fantastic. So let's take a closer look at some of the benefits and drawbacks of the different styles of conflict. And this is the Thomas Kilmann conflict style chart. And we all have a style that we gravitate towards that comes naturally to us, but we're all capable of all of these styles. And it's just about, again, that awareness and knowing which style you want to choose to suit the moment that you're in. So again, there's pluses and minuses, benefits and drawbacks to each of these styles, and understanding when they come into play is important. So if we look on this chart, in the corner, we have here the unassertive and uncooperative corner. We have the avoiding turtle who stays calm and out of the fray in situations, but issues may go unmanaged, and that means that they can become a bigger problem. And then on the opposite side, with both high assertiveness and cooperativeness, we have the collaborating owl, who is committed to building trust. But this requires willing parties, and decisions may take a long time to come to. Then we have the accommodating teddy bear, who is unassertive and cooperative, who aims for harmony and may accept blame in situations, but might also end up a doormat who resents the outcomes down the road. And opposite them is the competing shark, who is assertive and uncooperative, who confronts conflict quickly, but often has little regard for group harmony and relationships and can really escalate the emotions of the group. And then finally, in the center, we find the compromising fox, who looks for ways to meet in the middle, but this can result in some suboptimal outcomes, and sometimes there's some game playing to get there. So again, once we understand this, once we know what we tend to gravitate to, and then when we can quickly assess a situation and determine which would be the better approach, then we can kind of shift gears. So if you are aware of your own default conflict style, and then recognize that no single style is suitable for any situation, you may have to switch between styles in one situation. So when you're working in a group, you might have to adapt to connect with people and reach the positive goal and productive outcome that you're looking for. So we can analyze the conflict by considering the urgency and the importance of the goals, as well as the importance of the relationships and the emotions involved, and then choose that style that best fits the situation and the desired outcome, and then use your assertiveness and your cooperativeness skills to communicate effectively and respectfully, and hopefully reach the end goal that you're looking for. So managing in that moment when conflict arises requires a thoughtful approach and some consideration of what might be going on for the other person. And Gemma is going to talk a little bit more about that.
Thank you, Michelle. Yeah, I just wanted to share a little anecdote about myself and really kind of coming to the concept of needing to be mindful and thoughtful when in conflict. And certainly, what I found about myself was when I'm in a formal leadership role, I'm very careful around, and especially if I'm leading a group, I'm very careful about finding that pathway between my initial reaction and how I respond. And often would use sort of questions and try to remain really curious and try to approach conflict as an opportunity to learn more about how others are feeling. But after stepping out of a formal leadership role and not really having that awareness, I have found myself at times really going back to my sort of intuitive responses and reactive responses without really finding that pathway to my prefrontal cortex and really realizing how much effort it actually takes to slow down and to be thoughtful and to find that space between stimulus and response. And really needed to think about that and recognize that I really prefer my responses in conflictual situations when I have been able to take that time and find that pathway and find that little moment to stop and be aware and not necessarily focus only on my own feelings and emotions. And that takes effort and work. And I think recognizing that for me is just something that I'm more aware of now in all interactions that I am trying to be involved in, whether I'm in a formal leadership role or not. But I found that that was a big barrier for me in terms of getting the desired outcome, was really focusing on finding that space. So there is, some, again, just Michelle will take us through some other concepts around this, but really taking that time and asking what might be happening for that person. Why are they responding to me that way? Or why have they attacked me this way? Again, what do I want the outcome to be? I really found that I really did not like it when I escalated, and it just didn't seem to be congruent with the growth that I've had over my years as a leader. And I didn't like how I presented myself at that in those moments. And then again, readjusting what conflict style is needed in this moment. Do I, is my intuitive style really the one that's going to get the desired effect? And then lastly, am I really ready to talk about this right now? Maybe I've got a million other things going on and I can't actually get to that prefrontal cortex logical mind, and need to take a step back and ask for a moment or a time to reconvene with them. So just wanted to share, I notice, and it's not easy to go from the amygdala to the prefrontal cortex, and it does sort of really require that practice of being aware.
Yeah, thanks, Gemma. And that is leading us right into the last point about reflecting and learning for next time, once that conflict is over, that final phase. And I don't know if you've heard of John Kabat-Zinn, but he's the creator of mindfulness-based stress reduction. And he talks about how this mindfulness or awareness of what's happening in the present moment and the choices in that moment between stimulus and response help us to prevent causing harm to our relationships with ourselves and others. And most of all, he talks about that this takes practice. It is not really natural to any of us, and we're going to make mistakes along the way. So when you're in that moment, you've been through a conflict, instead of thinking about all the things that maybe you didn't say that were right, or, beating yourself up, maybe focus on some of the positive aspects. So what worked well in my response? What did I do better this time? What could I maybe do better next time? What did I feel physically? Again, we talked about that physical tell. Did you notice, like, what was that physical sensation that I noticed before the conflict really took hold, so that you can recognize it earlier next time? What specifically triggered me in this interaction, so that you kind of learn about yourself and what your triggers are, so that you can, again, quickly get yourself into your prefrontal cortex? And then how does this connect to past patterns or experiences that I've had? Again, so you can start to learn about yourself, and take that into the future with you. And then after the conflict has passed, you can continue actually strengthening the neural pathway between the limbic system and the prefrontal cortex. And the act of reflection itself actually strengthens that connection. And there are some specific practices that are out there in the literature that you can consider, and just a few of them. One of them is narrative reframing. So writing about the conflict after from different perspectives. So maybe from your own perspective, but also from the perspective of others who were involved. And again, that engages that prefrontal cortex in making meaning of the experience and the emotions around it. And then you can also try visualization. And I think we all have that tendency to mentally review the situation and, of course, say the perfect thing in the moment and when we're imagining it in our mind after the fact. But sometimes we focus on how we could have won that interaction instead of thinking about how we could have taken perhaps a different approach in our conflict style and had it go more smoothly. So just again, rehearsing mentally how it could have gone, that also really helps strengthen the pathway. And then also next time planning. So creating a specific if-then plan for similar situations in the future. So something like, if I notice that tension in my shoulders that's signaling to me that I'm being triggered by something, then I'll immediately take a deep breath, or maybe do a box breath sequence, so that I can get into my right mind before I say anything. So one thing more to think about in these reflective exercises is that they're best done as quickly after the conflict has occurred as possible to have the most impact. And then probably the most important thing of all, and especially from the work of John Kabat-Zinn, he would be very stressing that emotion's going to get the better of us no matter how much we think about this and practice it from time to time. And so when we don't behave the way that we really hoped we would, we really need to approach ourselves with self-compassion. And to talk a bit more about that, I'm going to pass it back to Andy.
Thanks. Yeah, I just wanted to touch a bit on this because I think for many of us in healthcare and maybe physicians in particular, I think self-compassion comes as a challenge. In another one of our webinars, we kind of talk about how in medicine there's this culture of excellence and an expectation that you have to be, close to perfect, which makes sense. The stakes are sometimes high. And it's usually a group of high achievers who have gotten to this point. And so um, sometimes just that awareness of like knowing that you might have a little bit of that bias towards yourself is important. So that when we don't do perfectly in a conflict and we're later reflecting, and if you're like me, you're ruminating about it and, worrying about what you said and whether you said the wrong thing or you came in too hot or whatever it might be, that you can kind of say, you know what, it's okay to not be perfect in this situation. And again, like Michelle said, just kind of focusing on, things that might have went well. And that awareness, I know we probably tell our patients this as well, that our perception of how we did in a situation may not be the same as everyone else's perception. And in all likelihood, you're being a lot harder on yourself than others may have perceived, your how you behaved to be. So keeping that in mind, keeping our biases in mind about ourselves, it can be very helpful.